Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform is making it easier than ever to support Black-owned brands. When you go to walmart.com/Black and Unlimited, you'll not only get to shop products from Black-owned brands, but also learn about founders like Janelle Stevens of Camille Rose, which specializes in products for naturally curly hair. And there are many more awesome products that you have yet to discover. It's all easy to find with Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform. Join in on celebrating Black brands today and every day at Walmart. We are Black and Unlimited. Visit walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover more. That's walmart.com/Black and Unlimited.
Welcome to episode 110 of the Highly Relevant Podcast, a U.S. Latino show where I interview the people and discuss the moments that are shaping our American and Latino pop culture. I'm your host, Jack Rico, and if it's your first time listening to this show, thank you for discovering us. So on the podcast this week, there's a Spanish singer I want to be talking about. Her name is Rosalia. She is quickly becoming a phenom in the Latin music scene, and the New York Times just included her song Con Altura featuring J Balvin in their top song picks of the week. And the reason that I'm kind of surprised about that is because, remember, it's the New York Times. It's not El Diario La Prensa. La Opinión. And it's hard for Spanish language artists to cross over into the giant of newspapers. So for the music artists to see that is because they're totally in tune with the vibe of what's happening in the Latino music scene right now, which is awesome. So I decided to bring in Isabela Raygoza. She's a music journalist for Rolling Stone magazine to give me a primer on who is Rosalia. What do I need to know? Where's she headed to? And so we're going to be talking about that. Then I'm talking to Mike Sargent. You guys know Mike Sargent. Him and I went to go see Shazam, and we're going to give you our first reaction on this movie. Is it terrible, like some of you think? Or is it one of the shining, bright lights of movies to come out in 2019? And then one of the things that I want to do from time to time is promote other Latino podcasts. And I want to do that by inviting them to come on the show and to help expand your podcast tastes, and also to kind of know who's out there that is trying to do the same stuff we're doing, which is create Latino representation in different types of mediums. So I decided to begin with Nick Leiber, who is the co-host of Don't Interrupt Me, Por Favor. It's a bilingual podcast, and it's one that you should subscribe to. But let's begin by talking about Rosalia.
Estoy brillando con highlighter, no lo ves, un clavel en mi melena, no lo ves, subí 15 stories, no lo ves, mira que quiero ser buena.
So for the last couple of weeks, I've been hearing about this Spanish millennial singer named Rosalia. The first time she came into my consciousness, I was on Twitter, noticed that she was trending like in the top 3. I clicked on it, and it was a video of her at a performance at a gala in Spain, where if you looked at the comments and the reactions, it was like God revealed himself to be a woman and her name was Rosalia. Seriously, it was so crazy. And I was like, okay, I got to pay attention to this woman. And then finally, just this past week, the New York Times selected her song Con Altura with J Balvin as one of the songs that you should be listening to this week. And it's hard to get into the New York Times. So that's why I'm bringing in Isabela Raygoza. She's a music journalist from Rolling Stone magazine to kind of give me a primer on who she is. Isabela, what was the first time you remember hearing about her?
I remember that she really stood out to me because I felt like since she was sort of representing this, centuries old folk genre, I mean, or is inspired by it, I thought it would like bring a really good diversity to the list. But at that time, she hadn't really done like the crossover yet. So we kind of had to pass it.
Right. So what is it exactly that everyone seems to be so thrilled and excited about just kind of even talking about her?
Well, another standout moment, I think that also possibly helped with just the global appeal is that she was brought into J Balvin's album to star in a track. I think that the way that she obviously is sort of leading this genre, is inspired by flamenco. I think it's a genre that the mainstream is very conscious of, but hadn't really kind of delve into it in a commercial way. I think the last commercial band that did flamenco was the Gypsy Kings, but obviously because of her like fluidity with doing trap, like her really hot track Malamente has track elements. I think that the way that she's just using that urban approach, it really just translates well with like our contemporary Latin pop that is resonating today, and because she's also linking up with pretty huge artists.
It's interesting because for a long time, like for example, the flamenco sound, I remember it going back all the way to the early 2000s. There was an artist by the name of Shazam that was Emilio Stefan had him under his wing. And he had put out an album, and much of the album had a lot of these sort of gypsy Spaniard type of flamenco-like sounds that he used to get a couple of records to number one, and I think even his album was at number one. And I feel like people were toying with it for a little while, but never to this extent. And I've always felt that the Latino or the U.S. Latino sound or the Latin American sound and the Caribbean sound never really meshed very well with Spain's flamenco vibes, either whether they're flamenco rap or flamenco pop. I just never thought that they really embraced it. Do you think that's changing now? You think Rosalia is an anomaly, an exception, a unicorn? Or do you think this is going to be something where everyone's going to start looking into flamenco as maybe the new sound, either to complement reggaeton or to replace it?
I think it's both, not to replace it necessarily, but to complement it. I do think that she did something very interesting with like that fusion, and her second album, Mal Querer, definitely reflected that balance between using like a subtle urban approach with flamenco. I mean, when we even look at Cuba is a very unique example because they have a lot of like rumba, which is very much influenced by like that Spanish genre, but then like Afro-Latin jazz is very just Cuban. So I think that there have been a couple like Caribbean regions with music that have meshed that Spanish sound, but we haven't really encountered it much lately. And which is funny because as I was kind of like delving into Rosalia's like on recent news, one of the festival producers of Sonar in Spain kind of dubbed her, she's the Rihanna of flamenco.
No, like, seriously?
I mean, that's what he said, right? That's what he said. But it made me like, it made me think a lot, because what I actually thought about with like her artwork and her videos and like album covers and the way she presents herself with her costumes, it kind of gives me the vibe of that 90s Romeo and Juliet film, like that kind of like a classic literature, like tradition, but with that urban feel. Like it kind of that reminded me so much of like how she's taking it, and I do think she's very unique.
Well, I was just going to ask you that. So, do you think she's legit? I mean, is she here for the long run, or is this like a fad, like just a moment in time?
Well, that's always a good question, right? You're asking the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Because we always want to know, like...
Well, there's Anita is involved, Becky G's having some sort of like renaissance within the Spanish language, space. I just can't tell them apart sometimes, where... not sound-wise. It's just you look at them and you go, well, they're young. They speak Spanish. They got that urban feel. This isn't anything original, except maybe for the flamenco part. So that's why I'm saying, is there enough space for all these female new rising stars to make their mark in what is usually a very male-dominated industry?
Well, we've seen recently, I mean, I guess even just with the Latin Grammy Awards, not only did was she nominated for 5 Latin Grammy nominations and won 2 of them. That's extremely impressive for a very relatively new artist. A lot of the categories in that featured a well-balanced distribution of male and female. And then we also see, like you said, Anita, and Becky G and Carol G.
Carol G with a K. The G sisters.
Exactly. So I really do feel that there is a huge sort of a presence and empowerment of, I guess, women artists coming up. And I think that in terms of just that gender presence, I think that hopefully, I mean, I want to say that they're here to stay. And I think we had a conversation about this before. I think that in 2018 and in 2019, and I think it's gonna they're definitely taking the reign, and they're doing very original stuff as well. And I think that the artists, like even just like J Balvin, kind of, who is one of the most globally streamed artists in Spotify. I think he was like number 1 at one point, and then like right now he's like at number 2, which is extremely impressive. Like they're doing a bunch of collaborations. So I think that and he does stuff with Anita as well. There's a lot of respect. There's a lot of the really hot shot heavyweight artists that are actually also paying respect to women and also giving, sharing that space. And I think that that's very valid for women to continue just having a strong presence in pop culture. So
for someone that is listening to the podcast right now, it's like, hey, I really haven't heard of this Rosalia chick. What's a good primer to kind of get people into Rosalia?
Well, the first song I would say would be Malamente, which is her intro track, the first track from her second album, from her 2018 album that came out in November, El Mal Querer. I think that's a very accessible song because it's very pop as well.
Oh, okay.
And that's the song that also was the one that got like the 5 nominations. It's extremely catchy. It's such an amazing introduction to the album. The second song of the album goes more into the traditional flamenco, which could not be super like easily digestible, but I think it just like it's so fluid, and the whole album is only 30 minutes, so it's not heavily weighed on like the whole kind of like, hey, you're throwing something super heavy and super new to me, but it's because it has such a pop formula, a lot of the tracks, and a great concept as well, and a really awesome producer behind the album. Only 30 minutes. I think it's so easily digestible. I think that's why it's the album is just extremely well crafted. I mean, I actually have it on my, like when I run on the treadmill, I always listen to the album. It's such a huge booster.
I got to tell you something. The New York Times recently came out with their weekly playlist of songs, and what I love about the New York Times, what they're doing is they're going global with their playlists. It's not just hip hop or country music or pop music from America. They're really picking from everywhere in the world and kind of creating their own cornucopia of sound. And one of them was Rosalia's new song with J Balvin, featuring El Guincho. It's called Con Altura. Now, let's listen to a little bit of it right now.
El dembow lo canto con Honduras. Dicen una estrella, una figura. De Héctor aprendí la sabrosura. Nunca he visto una joya tan pura.
Esto es pa' que quede lo que yo hago dura.
Con altura.
Demasiadas noches de travesura.
Con altura.
Vivo rápido y no tengo cura.
Con altura.
Y de joven pa' la sepultura.
Con altura. Esto es pa' que quede lo que yo hago dura.
Con altura.
Demasiadas noches de travesura.
Con altura.
I gotta be honest with you. I'm trying so hard to really like this song, and I just can't seem to get why this is such a hot song. What is your particular taste? Have you heard Con Altura, and what are your thoughts on it?
I really liked it, actually. I guess maybe because I am a very big fan of J Balvin. It's extremely reggaeton, like very smooth. I think it's super catchy. I know that a lot of the songs that like just released that are like making the rounds in like these famous playlists or like topping the charts, sometimes it takes more than one play, but like, I mean, I thought it was amazing. And El Guincho, I think he's like a fantastic producer. The way that he like samples his beats and he loops them, and it's just, I think it's very smooth, and it's also super dance worthy. So I liked it.
J Balvin right now is collaborating with so many people that I think he's in that weird zone where he could become overexposed, right? Which is a concern that I have because I really want him to last a while. But I think he's collaborating with so many people that it's going to come to a point where there's no more artists to collaborate with. He's going to be going into some weird genres just to kind of make a collaboration. And I think what we need more is more J Balvin albums, not J Balvin collaborations.
Wow.
What are your thoughts on J Balvin's overexposure, over amount of collaborations, and do you think that just because J Balvin's on a track, it's automatically amazing?
You're bringing up really good points. And I never really thought about like just him being overexposed where he burns himself out. I think right now he's like super hot. He's like extremely trending and his momentum hasn't slowed. Yes, of course, there is a risk that he's bringing too many artists into the picture. But I do feel like a lot of the artists that he has been collaborating with, in the case of Anita and Rosalia, for example, that I feel because I was already aware of them before, I feel he's sort of playing the role of like a Diplo, because Diplo also did that a lot with a bunch of artists from like all over the world, in Brazil, in like, just India, and like, everywhere. And I was having the same thoughts, like, hey, this guy's like picking artists, and who knows how many of those artists are gonna like have like a lasting power. Right now, well, I right now might be a little, biased because I haven't seen a track that I'm like, oh hell no, I hate that track. Oh, who the hell
really? So wait a minute. So any J Balvin song that you've heard so far has been a hit?
No, I'm not saying that it's been a hit. Like
for you.
No. I'm just saying that I don't hate it. Either it's like okay, like it's not like really a standout, it's like whatever, or it's a hit.
But they're digestible at least. You still listen to it.
Digestible. That's what I'm saying. So far, I'm not like what I've heard. Like that song Reggaeton, for example, the one that he just got, like his one of his previous singles, I think he dropped it in November.
Mm-hmm.
That one, okay, I can't tell you, it was not my favorite, but I didn't hate it either.
And a lot of the stuff that you're listening to are singles,
right,
with a bunch of artists that I've never heard of. Is it that they're paying wads of money to J Balvin to buy sort of his name and popularity association to these new artists? Or is it that J Balvin really truly believes in these artists and wants to help them? Or C, these artists, just because I don't know them doesn't mean they're not superstars. Maybe they're superstars and J Balvin just wants to work with a superstar. Which one is it?
I think it's a little bit of all three of them. Obviously, I don't think it has to do exclusively like, well, actually, it's just for marketing purposes, because I do feel that if it was strictly for the reason of marketing and like, let's say this particular artist that he's featuring is buzzing in their certain country, I don't think that there's, like we spoke about it before, the difference between being authentic and inauthentic. I do kind of feel that he really does have like this global approach, and he's very receptive to even experiment within like his genre a bit, not like diverging too far off his brand. So he's kind of like a curator, where I do feel that there is like that he does have maybe some creative freedom, but not like maybe 100%. Maybe I'm sure that there's like a huge like the industry is behind a lot of these decisions that he's making, because right now he's like, I mentioned, he's number 2 the most listened to artist on Spotify globally, and like that already says a lot about him. And the thing about the singles, there's a lot of artists in urban music that are doing that. They're just dropping singles and not dropping albums.
What is that?
Bad Bunny was dropping mad singles before he was already like a 4 billion streamed man before he even released his debut. Anita as well, she is extremely phenomenally famous in Brazil, is just crossing over here, and I was already aware of Anita before she collaborated with J Balvin.
Yeah, you were writing articles on her already.
Yeah, so it could possibly, like a lot of the artists that J Balvin has collaborated with, I've recognized a lot of them before, and it could be because my focus in my writing is in Latin music, so I'm kind of always just like searching about like who are making the rounds in streaming services, who like, or in YouTube, like who's getting who's giving who a shout out,
right?
So I think that like he's collaborating with a lot of our artists, and Rosalia, is buzzing hard. Like, she's playing Coachella already,
Isabela Raygoza, music journalist. You can read her articles on Rolling Stone magazine and Vice's Noisy Music.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Ese gritarito roto, yo sentí como crujía antes de caerse al suelo.
And before Mike Sargent and I give you our first reaction of Shazam, let's take a quick whirl into what other movies are making their premiere this weekend.
It's okay now. Are you back?
Back from where?
Pet Sematary, a Stephen King horror remake about a family brought back from the dead.
What's going on?
There's a place rage brings things back.
The sensation, moving backwards. Even though we're moving forwards, getting further from what's getting nearer.
High Life, father and daughter stranded in space.
Break the laws of nature. You'll pay for it.
Would you look at that crazy white man?
Folks in this town want blacks to stay in their own schools. I'm here to protect my family, so all the better is you don't get in my way.
Same God made you, made me.
Best of Enemies, Tajari P. Henson and Sam Rockwell. What else you need to know?
As long as the CP Ellises of the world keep getting their way, ain't nothing gonna change.
She looked at me like I got some kind of monster.
Talking about home.
Hey, it's Jack Rico. I'm here with Mike Sargent inside the AMC Lowe's 34th Street as we're seeing the end credits of Shazam in an advanced screening here in New York. And Mike, I have to say that this was one of the most fun experiences I've had in all of 2019 so far. Thoughts?
Well, absolutely. And it's funny because as you're watching it, even when the credits were coming out, everything I knew about this film, you feel like DC,
Warner Brothers.
Yeah, Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, DC is what I meant to say. Warner Brothers and the DC, because Batman was so dark and it was successful, they thought all of them had to be dark. And this movie is exactly what it should be. It's its own thing. It's funny, but it's actually got a real story. It's got a bunch of characters. Things I didn't expect to happen. I have to say, this is probably, you had said it's probably the most enjoyable film I've seen this year so far.
How would you rank this film in the DC universe amongst all the other superhero films that they've done so far?
I'd say in its own way, it's as good as Wonder Woman or Aquaman. You know, both Wonder Woman and Aquaman had their own thing. They had their own tone, their own kind of superhero story, and it was different. And I think that's what they should all be different. People read certain characters. People love a certain comic book title because of what's going on there. You may love comics in general, but what you like is the variety of the kinds of stories and characters. And this is sort of like Big meets Superman.
Yeah. Well, as we're watching Shazam here and doing a first reaction, there is another end credit. Hold
Don't
on.
beat yourself up, buddy. You're gonna find someone. Yeah, I'm sure. Because there's plenty of fish in the sea. Of course it's not real. I can't talk to fish. Even if I could, I mean, honestly, what could we do with that that's cool?
I don't know, maybe command an army of billions in the ocean?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not that cool.
Oh, there's two end credits that you should stick around for, but honestly, I don't know if they're as good as the Marvel ones, and it looks like DC decided to do what Marvel's template of doing the credits after the scene, which DC said it wouldn't do before.
Well, I think they have to. I think this is the audience. And look, Marvel got there first, and they've showed you how to do it. Now just do it your way. You know, I think DC was smarter with the superhero TV series because they hit their groove with that before Marvel got any of their heroes on TV. And I think it worked, and they worked because, you know, Arrow and all those shows had that, Smallville, they had their own thing.
I would equate Shazam to like Kick-Ass in terms of movies that are superhero genres, but they're really comedies.
masked and guised within a superhero film. It's not a superhero film first and then some sprinkle with some comedy here. This is a straight up comedy.
It is, but you know,
it's like a family comedy too.
It is. Well, what I think is interesting is that this strikes a tone that this is not really for little kids. You know, they don't show any blood, but people get their heads bitten off. There's some pretty grisly deaths. They didn't pull back on the action and the violence. People die in this movie. People get killed in this movie. People get maimed. Now, you don't see the blood, but, you know, the action was pretty strong, I thought.
Let's layer this out. Let's talk about casting first.
Okay.
I thought the kids were fantastic. Excellent. There was a diversity of children there. Absolutely. Asian, Latino, African American, even the parents. I think one of them was Samoan. The other one was a Latina mom with a Latina child. They're all foster kids, which really plays to the family audience very well. I thought the action was great. I thought the CGI was fun. I was really skeptical about Zachary Levi at first because I wasn't exactly sure if he fit like a superhero type. But, I mean, he was playing a comedian within that suit, and I think that played well.
Well, I think the conceit of it, the idea, I don't think in the original, I don't know the source material as well. It's like vague in my mind, but I remember like a TV series I saw on video.
I remember the cartoon Shazam as well.
There was cartoons, but I thought Shazam was a completely different person. What they did here is he turns into Shazam, but he's still Billy Batson.
Right.
And so I think that was a smart move because that's the big conceit that he's still a 14-year-old.
Right.
But he's got a fully grown body and all these superpowers.
What I'm trying to understand here is where does DC go from here? Is every movie moving forward? Because this is obviously going to work. It's going to be the #1 movie at the box office. So does every movie from now on, is it a comedy? Are there going to be any more dark sort of
I think there will be dark,
films?
but I think if they're smart, they'll really follow the Marvel playbook. The Marvel movies have always had humor, but some more than others. Some are darker toned than others. Some more spy genre. Some a little more fish out of water genre. Some a little more straight comedy genre. They were going for something with the first Thor. They got, what's his name?
Chris Hemsworth?
No, the director, Shakespearean. Because it was
Kenneth
Branagh. Because it was an Asgardian. They were smart to let each film have its own tone, just like the comics did. And I think DC's, if they're smart, that's what they're going to do.
So they're going to go ahead and do more comedies, or at least ingrain some more, not take itself so seriously, which worked perfectly well with Batman, but doesn't seem to be working so much.
Well, Batman was the dark character. He was the Dark Knight. He was a detective, and that's what he did. He solved crimes. He's out at night. That's Batman. Superman doesn't need to be dark. Wonder Woman it doesn't need to be dark, but it could be a lot of things that has nothing to do with Batman.
As everyone has left the theater, we're the only people here. The theater's actually ours at this moment. End credits left. Let's wrap this up. And how would you summarize this film for the people that are curious about Shazam, never really thought about Shazam as a serious superhero within the pantheon of superheroes, whether this is too much of a joke of a superhero film? Where do you put this one, and should people go check it out?
Well, first, I think people should definitely check it out. Second of all, I think what's smart about it is, unlike Green Lantern, let's say. Green Lantern was always a silly-ass comic, but they tried to put it on screen, and it took itself too seriously, even though they got a fairly comedic actor to do it. This, they know it's a comedy. The only way this will work is as a comedy, and it was smart to do, and it works as an action comedy.
So, reporting from the AMC Lowe's 34th, that was the first reaction of Shazam.
So in the spirit of you and I discovering new U.S. Latino podcasts, I invited Nick Leiber. He is the co-host of Don't Interrupt Me, Por Favor, a bilingual radio show and podcast, to tell us a little bit about the value proposition of his show. what inspired him and his co-host to do it, and the economical aspects of podcasting today.
Nicholas, let's begin with the show. Don't interrupt me, por favor. When was it originated?
So we do this show. There are three of us. We're three bilingual journalists from different backgrounds.
Hola, humanos. Aquí estamos otra vez en Don't Interrupt Me, por favor. ¿Y quiénes somos? Vamos a presentarnos. Lisa, ¿cómo estás?
Hi, estoy muy bien. I'm Lisa Button.
I'm Nick Leiber. Lisa Button is a journalism educator and journalist who, until very recently, was the managing editor of the Schuster Investigative Journalism Institute up at Brandeis University in Boston. And she's an amazing journalist who just did an amazing story about the effects of immigration policy, current immigration policy, on students and their parents. Guillermo Fesser is another amazing journalist.
Yeah, I really enjoy him.
He's originally from Madrid, and he's lived in the U.S. now for over a decade.
Hostia.
See, hostia. and he is a broadcast journalist. For many years, he hosted or co-hosted this radio show that he created in Spain called Goma Espuma, which was a beloved radio show, 3 hours of news and satire a day that he did. So we got together last year, and the three of us were talking about how much fun it would be to do a weekly show that celebrates bilingualism, that celebrates people who speak, people who navigate two worlds, or maybe more than two worlds. And the goal is really simple. We want you to hang out with us for about an hour on the radio or about half an hour in the podcast version. And you're going to hang out with us and a guest or two who's done some really interesting, timely work.
Why do these guests appeal to you in your show?
I think it's amazing that someone can speak more than one language and can navigate more than one world. And I think that celebrating these people and talking with these people is really a treat, is a luxury, is something that I love doing. In the course of writing a lot of stories over the years, I would come across these people who were doing amazing things, and then it would turn out that they also spoke a few languages. And they were really good at explaining some part of their work in English, say, or in Spanish, or in another language. And I thought, we should show these people off.
Bouncing off of that, what do you think is the value of Don't Interrupt Me, por favor, to the listeners?
I think you can get a few things out of this. You can, as the famous click and clack of car talk folks like to say, you can waste another perfectly good hour with us, laughing, having fun. You could learn something. You might learn something you didn't know about the work that Jose Andres is doing around the world in Puerto Rico and Mozambique right now. But you could also learn an expression you didn't know that people use in New York City or in Caracas or in Mexico City. You'll sort of stumble onto these different things, and you'll learn about these different people, and you'll play around with language.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about you.
Sure.
We met here I'm not sure if you guys know, but this show is actually being recorded at the Made in New York Center IFP incubator, where they have a podcast studio. It's one of the reasons I actually came here. I met you because you also do a podcast. But one of the things that I noticed is that you're not natively Latino.
No, I'm not.
Yet you speak very well Spanish. Vamos a hablar un poquito en español.
Vale. Tengo un acento horrible, pero entiendo todo.
Pero ¿por qué hablas español?
Bueno, como periodista, como niño, como un ser humano más joven, siempre quería ser periodista. Y yo pensaba, conociendo muy poco, entendiendo muy poco como niño, que sería muy bueno aprender idiomas para poder entrevistar a gente y viajar a donde vive, donde trabaja, donde está gente interesante. Y entonces por eso estuve trabajando varios años en España y viviendo en España, en Chile, en Italia, aprendiendo idiomas, aprendiendo culturas. Pero también tuve un profe en el instituto, buenísimo, y yo creo que la chispa empezó con él.
Who's the best guest you've had on so far?
The best guest.
Is it Jose Andres?
No. I mean, we've had so many. I don't want to say who the.
Well, what's one that stands out in your mind as?
I mean,
a very
I think
joyful
an interview that left me shaking, and I don't know if this is the best, but this is something that really stuck with me.
It's the most visceral. Then.
Yeah, where I was literally shaking after the show, like shaking, trembling, and that doesn't happen to me very often with doing the show. Was a guy named Manuel Oliver, who is the father of Joaquin Oliver, who was one of the students who was killed in the Parkland shootings. And he came on the show, and he talked about his son, and he talked about using his art, Manuel Oliver is an artist, is a graphic artist. He calls himself a graphic activist. And he's basically been going around the U.S. and around the world and making art and talking about the problem, obviously, of losing your son to gun violence, but of the problem of gun violence in this country. Manuel Oliver is originally from Venezuela. That was a show, that was a person who I found the interview really honest, really powerful, obviously, for me, really kind of scary. I have 2 daughters. They have to learn to do soft lockdowns. They have to learn how to do hard lockdowns.
Teachers now supposedly have to have guns in the classrooms.
Well, I hope not in New York.
Yeah.
But, so that was powerful. The following week we talked to someone named Edgardo Miranda Rodriguez, who is actually another graphic who lives in the graphic novel comic book world, who was also quite interesting. It was fun to talk with him about how he creates comic book characters, and he's doing a lot with Latino empowerment. One of his comic book characters is this amazing, I think her name is La Borinqueña. She has asthma. She went to Colombia. She's navigating these worlds. She's helping Puerto Rico.
I like to do pop culture because I don't want to hear those stories. They're unsettling to me. And anything that's unsettling to me, I want to avoid. What I have noticed, though...
you talked to Cristina Gallego, who
Yes.
did a movie that,
But
is
it's still
fairly
a movie.
unsettling.
Yes, but it's still a movie that we get to talk about film and we get to talk about production. But we don't just talk about the first original derivation of the drug cartel in Colombia. It's not just about that. It's almost like an interpretation, an artistic interpretation of that part in time in history. But the reason I don't do podcasts like yours, I've always felt, is because what value do these stories, outside of unsettling someone, shaking someone to the root of their soul, what value is there of that? Because you go to sleep with nightmares. You start looking at the world in a very negative way. Where is the happiness? Where is the joy in that conversation? And it's one of the reasons that I don't do it, because I don't see it. So can you educate me a little bit about...
My thinking? Sure, yeah.
About why those types of stories are valuable for people to listen to, as opposed to maybe this podcast. It's all about joy and happiness and fun, and really sort of isolates negativity or any murders, fires, crime, those types of stories that I after 9/11, I just couldn't deal with it, man.
Well, I think I want to live in a place where, I can walk down the street and I can talk to my neighbors and I can raise a family. And I think that in order to have that society that I want, that I aspire to, we need to talk about things that sometimes are unpleasant, are difficult. If something isn't working in our society, if kids are being killed by guns, by gun violence, I think we need to talk about that because I don't want my kids to have to do hard lockdowns and soft lockdowns. It might be a selfish thing, but I think that, yes, that's unsettling and that is unpleasant. But until we start to talk about things, I won't be doing my part to contribute to a society that I want to live in. And I think that you can have a balance. I think you can have Cristina Gallego on your show. You can have the woman who created El Espace on your show. I think listening to your show, you're doing this. You might not consciously be doing it, but you want to live in a place where you want to live, and you want to,
Right.
I think, we're doing our part, and maybe we don't do it the right way at first, and we learn and blah blah blah, but we're having fun.
Why are podcasts important today?
People have gotten into the habit, not all of them, but people have gotten into the habit certainly of listening to the radio, and the jump from radio to podcast makes sense. I mean, discovery is the big problem, right? How do you know that Highly Relevant with Jack Rico is there? How do you tell people? How do you know that Don't Interrupt Me, Por Favor is there? How do you get the word out to people? But I think there is an appetite to stick things in your ears and go rake your leaves or go on your commute from point A to point B to work and hear something. So I think it's a tricky time too, though, because lots of other people have realized this. Someone from WNYC mentioned 400 new podcasts are launched a day. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's 40, but still, that's a lot of new podcasts.
And before I let you go, are you guys monetizing your podcast? Because I think it's important to talk about simply because there's a lot of people that want to do podcasts.
Yes.
But I don't think they understand the ramifications of the economy of podcasts. The people who do podcasts like myself, look, I'm not getting paid for this podcast, and I've been doing it for a little bit over 2 years. In your case, are you making money off of this? Can you quit your full-time job just become a host?
We're not making money, and I can't quit my full-time job.
So why then do it?
Well, we would like at some point to have it be sustainable. And if you look at the numbers, the bulk of the advertising is in radio. Some of it, a small fraction, is starting to move over to podcasts. I think there will be a business here. I don't know who will make the bulk of the money, but ideally, we're doing this to have a sustainable show where we can say, hey, we're going to do this show and it's in 2 weeks and we're going to be talking with a few people down in the Rio Grande. And it would be great to physically go there, but we can't afford to do that right now because the show doesn't.
So you really do it as a labor of love.
Well, we're experimenting to see if we can turn it into a sustainable audio journalism business. So ideally, we will figure out how to do that. Is that sponsorships? Is that advertising that runs at the beginning, middle, and end of the show? Is it a grant from an organization that wants to promote the idea of learning languages? I don't know. But we're in the early days. Right now, what we're really concerned about, perhaps naively, is let's make something that listeners want to listen to.
Right.
But we have.
So which one is it? What's the catch here? Is it the chicken?
I don't know.
Or the egg?
That's a great question. We need to talk to people and say, how do you make money doing this? So we're trying to figure it out. But I don't know. I don't have the magic bullet secret solution. Let's talk after the show, and I'll see how much money you have in your wallet, and
What suggestions do you have? What advice do you have for those Hispanics that want to create a podcast, knowing that there's no money in it right now?
Sure. I think there are some successful podcasts, and I think you can eventually make money if you produce something that lots and lots of people want to listen to. But I would say, do some Googling. Listen to things, read a lot. I know that Maria Hinojosa, I know that her Futuro Media group has some kind of educational / fellowship program for aspiring podcasters. I know that PRX and Google have a program, a training program for podcasters. I know that there is a lot out there in terms of training, in terms of materials, in terms of reading, in terms of listening. But you bring up a really good point. How do you make money from it? So also in doing your research, I would say also look and see if you can find specific courses, maybe at journalism schools, maybe on PRX's website, maybe on a website called transom.org.
Mm-hmm. I know it, yeah.
Yeah, but about how people are creating business models to make their shows sustainable. And then once you've learned all this, please give me a call.
And get on my show.
Yeah.
Nicholas, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
Highly
you, Jack.
Relevant podcast. The name of the show is called Don't Interrupt Me, Por Favor. Where can people listen to it?
You can find it on all of the major podcast platforms. You can find our Twitter. But if you look around for Don't Interrupt Me, Por Favor on places where you listen to podcasts, we hope you can find it. You should be able to find it. You can also find out what we're up to on at Interrupt Show on Twitter. Thank you so much, Jack.
And that's it for episode 110 of the Highly Relevant Podcast. I want to thank Isabela Raygoza, Mike Sargent, and Nick Leiber for coming on the show. And if you'd like to support the show, please spread the love on social media and pass the word to all of your friends. You can reach me on Instagram at Jack Rico and Facebook at Jack Rico 40. Remember, it's only through your support that our show can grow. I'm Jack Rico. See you next week on another episode of Highly Relevant.
Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform is making it easier than ever to support Black-owned brands. When you go to walmart.com/Black and Unlimited, you'll not only get to shop products from Black-owned brands, but also learn about founders like Janelle Stevens of Camille Rose, which specializes in products for naturally curly hair. And there are many more awesome products that you have yet to discover. It's all easy to find with Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform. Join in on celebrating Black brands today and every day at Walmart. We are Black and Unlimited. Visit walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover more. That's walmart.com/Black and Unlimited.